Imagine living in your home for the rest of your life, safe, comfortable, and free from monthly mortgage payments. For many, it sounds too good to be true, yet it's an option more people are discovering every day. Welcome to Seniors Home Zone, where we reflect on life's transitions and talk about what matters most. I'm Rebecca Finegan, Senior Home Coach and Certified Aging in Place Specialist. Today, I'm joined by Michael Pianco, U.S. Army veteran and president of the Reverse Mortgage Division of Veterans Mortgage of America. Michael, first of all, thanks for your service, and thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
I want to start with some perspective for people. Right now, there's 12,000 seniors turning 62 every day.
That's correct.
That's a really large number, learning how to go to their next chapter in life.
Mm-hmm.
What's the percentage of seniors actually aging in place?
So the actual number of seniors wanting to age in place depends on who's putting out the stat. But, you see statistics anywhere between 78% and 90% of all seniors want to age in the home that they're currently in.
And yet there's only 2% that use the reverse mortgage.
Yeah. Out of all the seniors that are out there that are turning between 62 and 65 years of age, there's 12,000 a day, not a month, not a quarter, not a year. But out of those that are eligible, that have got close to 12 to 13 trillion in equity, only about 2% are actually using the reverse mortgage itself. That means 98% of all seniors aren't using the reverse mortgage for a lot of reasons, which is what we're going to talk about today. There's so many misunderstandings about the product.
Exactly. And that leads me to my next question. Can you review with us the myths versus the facts? Because a lot of times when I mention the word reverse mortgage, people are like, oh no, I don't want to do that. So if you can help us understand that a little bit more.
Sure. Well, like, for example, one of the biggest myths is that you lose title to the property. The bank owns the property, and that's absolutely not true. You remain on title just like as if you own the home free and clear, or if you had a traditional mortgage on it, it's no different. You remain on title. You can do what you want with the property, meaning you can paint the property purple. You can change the landscaping. You can add a room as long as you get a permit for it. So it is your home. The bank does not take title. You're on title to the property. That's the number one myth. Number two myth is that if something happens to me or my spouse and we pass it on to the kids don't get it. The bank gets it. Well, that's not true either. There's 4 opportunities that the kids or the heirs can move forward with, which is they can buy the home, they can sell the home. If they're on title, they can refinance onto it, or they can do what's called the deed in lieu of. So they've got lots of opportunities, unlike what most people think, that the bank takes the home when the last surviving borrower passes or goes into a full-time care community. We call it a maturity event, but that's just not true. Again, they can buy it, sell it, refinance onto it, or they could do what's called the deed in lieu of. If it doesn't make sense, they don't want anything to do with the property, they can walk away from it.
One of the things that people are concerned about is that the house is going to end up being more expensive for their heirs. Can you explain why that won't happen?
It's a reverse mortgage for a reason. And what happens is that the loan balance actually goes up, because with a traditional mortgage, you actually make a payment. And so every month your mortgage comes down just a little bit, especially in the first 10 years. You're really just paying interest. With a reverse mortgage, you're not required to make a payment. You can make a payment, but you're not required to. So how does the bank make their money? Well, it works in reverse. They actually add to the reverse mortgage the interest, because you're not required to make a payment. So you actually add to the reverse mortgage loan balance, and you only make a payment, and you're only required to make a payment at the very end. If you refinance out of it, you sell the house, right? Or you pass and then the heirs pay it off. Because of the non-recourse feature, you never have to come out of pocket if the home is upside down. How they make their money is they actually add what's called deferred interest. They actually add it to the loan balance and they collect at the end. Now, can you make a payment on a reverse mortgage? You absolutely can. No one's ever going to stop you from making a payment on any loan that you get, but it's not a requirement until you decide to pay off the loan or you pass that on to the heirs and they pay off the loan itself. So another myth is a lot of times you see spouses that are considerably younger, right? 10, 15, 20 years. And the senior spouse is concerned that, wow, when something happens to me, because I'm probably going to go first, whether that's moving into a full-time care community or it's I just pass, what happens to my husband or wife? It's called an eligible non-borrowing spouse, and they're protected. And what that means is as long as they were married to the borrower at the time they got the reverse mortgage, and as long as their age was used in the calculation, and as long as they stay married to the borrower during the duration of the reverse mortgage, and they remain in the home after the senior borrower passes or moves into a full-time care community, they can also live in that property in perpetuity as long as the taxes, insurance, and the HOA is paid, if the HOA is applicable. Okay, so that's a big one for people. So if you've got a younger spouse, male or female, and you get a reverse mortgage, we use their age because of life expectancy, number one. You have to be married to that individual at the time you get the reverse mortgage, right? You have to stay married to them during the term of the reverse mortgage. And if something happens to you, God forbid, you pass or you move on to a full-time care community, you have to remain in the property as your owner-occupied residence and make sure you pay the taxes and insurance and the HOA and maintain the property as well. So that's a big one for people, right? That's a big one. Another myth is our reverse mortgages, they're expensive. It depends on how you look at it and how long you have it. I mentioned earlier the non-recourse feature. It's one of the strongest consumer protections for both the borrower and also the heirs. And what I like to say is a reverse mortgage puts a moat, like the castle and the moat, puts a moat around the property, the borrower, and the heirs. And with the non-recourse feature, what that means is that you, as the borrower, will never owe more than the value of the property. So wait, what does that mean? That means that, let's say we have remember, if you go back to 2007 and 8, most properties in certain areas of the country declined by 50% in terms of their value. Well, if you had a reverse mortgage at that point in time, you might be upside down, meaning the loan amount is higher than the actual value of the property. So let's just put math to it. Let's say that 2007, your loan balance was $300,000. Your property value before 2007 was $500,000. But when we crashed, the property value went down to $250,000 because you lost half. So now you're $50,000 upside down because the loan balance is $300,000. If you decided to sell the property, or God forbid something happens to you and the kids take it over and they've got to do something with it, you never have to come out of pocket for the difference or the shortfall. That's what the non-recourse feature is. So where does that come from? What makes that possible? One of the biggest fee, and I'd like to say it's an investment, but the biggest fee associated with the reverse mortgage is the 2% upfront mortgage insurance that's charged. And it's charged based on the value of the property. I can't control that. It's not a negotiated number. That dollar amount goes to FHA, which goes into a pool of money. And that is there in the event that if a borrower goes upside down on the property and there's a shortfall for the borrower or the heirs, that money is pulled from to cover that difference. So if that same example, loan amount was $300,000, but the value was $250,000, if I sold the property, refinanced onto it, any of that, FHA is going to step in. And when that loan is paid off, they're going to cover that $50,000 shortfall. They never go after your personal assets of the borrower or the heirs as it relates to a reverse mortgage. So is a reverse mortgage expensive? If you're in the property for a year or two, then possibly that could be expensive because, again, it's 2% times the value of the property. So my mom, for example, her value of her property was $750,000. So that was a $15,000 cost. But that came out of the proceeds of the loan. She didn't have to write a check for that. So her $300,000 line of credit was after all the expenses were paid, just like a cash out refinance on a traditional mortgage. So the longer you have the reverse mortgage, the longer that investment or that cost is going to be amortized out. So I like to say, well, is it expensive? I don't know that it's expensive. With all the consumer protections we've talked about so far, right? Is that expensive? I don't know that it is. You get a loan that you never have to make a payment on. You have a line of credit in some cases that grows. It's not associated with the home value, right? Your home value could go to zero and that line of credit is intact. So I like to say that it's not expensive. Again, if you have it for a year, yeah, that could be expensive. But most senior borrowers that get a reverse mortgage have their reverse mortgage for much longer than that, usually 10 to 15 years. The other myth is that a reverse mortgage is only for the desperate. What I like to say is that, well, if you waited too long, maybe you are desperate. But because I think the reverse mortgage is such a great insurance policy for a senior, it really truly is. Even if you have a forward mortgage on it right now and you want to pay the house off, You could still pay the house off using a reverse mortgage. But when you put a reverse mortgage on a house, you are protected. FHA is in position number 1 and number 2. No one can come in and put a lien on that property. As long as you pay your property tax, HOA, and your insurance, no one's ever going to take that property from you as long as it's your owner-occupied residence. I always say, if you wait until you have a car accident to go out and get auto insurance, you're not going to get it. You waited too long. If you wait to get medical insurance when you have a medical emergency and you're in the hospital, you're not going to get it. So the reverse mortgage puts that moat around you and the property, and it allows you to have an additional lever to pull in the event you do have an emergency. Like my mom, she now can dip into her $300,000 line of credit, and she can do what she needs to do. And again, she doesn't have to make a payment. It's not a requirement until that loan is paid off at the very end. That's fantastic. She can make renovations. And that's the thing with the reverse mortgage, any funds that you take out of a reverse mortgage, meaning the line of credit, it's not taxable. It's not treated as income. And she can use the money for whatever she wants to use it for. There's absolutely zero restrictions. None, zero, nada. So again, is it for the desperate? If you wait too long, maybe you are desperate. And that's what's really sad too, is that sometimes borrowers wait too long and their property has deteriorated to the point where we can't get the house qualified because there's too many repairs that need to be made. I hear a lot, I'm 65 years of age, I'm doing great. You might be great today, but where are you going to be when you're 70 or 72 or 73? Will you have the cognitive ability to get through the counseling? So I like to say, get it when you can. Don't wait, because sometimes if you wait, you won't be able to get it for various reasons, right? You won't be able to get it. So again, it's, to me, a reverse mortgage is one heck of an insurance policy that really protects the senior and their heirs for a lot of different reasons.
For those listening, can you explain what the minimum qualifications are? Because people are probably saying, oh, this sounds good. Let me do it.
For the FHA reverse mortgage, what we call a HECM or home equity conversion mortgage, that's the first one is 62 and above. Can you have a spouse that's younger? Yes, you can. And we can talk about that, but it's 62 and above. It must be your primary residence, meaning that's where you live full time. Can you have a second home? Absolutely you can. Can you go on long extended vacations? Absolutely you can. Could you go on a mission with your church? You absolutely can. As long as it's your primary residence, it's not a rental, it's not a vacation home, it's not a second home. That's one of the other qualifications. The other thing too is that you have to go through HUD counseling. It's a minimum requirement. It has to be a HUD approved counseling agency. And you have to go through that. That's another consumer protection. And the reason why that's so important is because they want to make sure that you have the cognitive ability to understand the reverse mortgage, number one. Number two, they also want to make sure that there's no elder abuse. We're dealing with a protected class, and they want to make sure there's no elder abuse, meaning there's nobody pushing that senior to get the reverse mortgage, maybe to get access to that line of credit. And they want to make sure that we're doing our job and that we're educating the senior about the reverse mortgage product itself. The last thing is a financial assessment. And the financial assessment is really important because one of the reasons why the reverse mortgage got a bad name is because back in the 80s, there was a lot of bad actors. And like any new industry, even though the reverse mortgage has been around since 1961, that's the very first reverse mortgage ever done. Back in the 80s, they really got popular. The industry wasn't as regulated as it is today. And so the financial assessment is done in underwriting. What they make sure is that you can cover 3 buckets: your current debts that you have on your credit report, and it's not a FICO score driven program, cover your housing expenses, meaning your living expenses at the house. And then also they want to make sure that you can cover your taxes, your insurance, and your HOA, because that's where most people got in trouble when the financial assessment wasn't as strong and as stringent as it is today. The HOA can foreclose on your property if you don't pay your HOA. If you don't pay your property taxes, the county, whether you own the home free and clear, or you have a traditional mortgage, or you have a reverse mortgage, if you don't pay your property taxes for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, they can come in and foreclose on the property. So the financial assessment makes sure that that senior and that the reverse mortgage is a sustainable product for them because they can cover those. They're looking at their Social Security income. They're looking at their what we call their imputed assets. How much do they have in reserves, meaning 401ks, IRAs, stocks, bonds, whatever they have. Pensions, that's also part of the income. And here's the beautiful thing too, part of the financial assessment is if you have a line of credit, like my mom has a reverse mortgage and she got a $300,000 line of credit. If my mom was on the border of qualifying on the financial assessment, they would look at that $300,000 line of credit and they would treat that as income and they'd amortize it out over her life expectancy and they'd add that to her income. So they would take, if she's 78, they'd take 22 years up to 100, or they'd say, well, her life expectancy is up to a 90, but they're going to use that line of credit as additional income to help that borrower qualify. That's why I love the product so much. They really err on the side of the senior. So again, the 4 minimum qualifications are 62 and above, owner occupied residence, you have to attend and participate in HUD approved counseling, and you've got to get through the financial assessment, which is part of the underwriting.
Okay, great. Do they come to the home and do all those assessments?
No. So the financial assessment is done in underwriting. That's where you submit documentation that we send that in. The counseling is done over the telephone, which makes it really, really easy. And we can't participate in that. When we present the reverse mortgage to you and the proposal, there actually is telephone numbers and agency names that you can reach out to and set up that time to make the call. Has to be an independent thing. We can't participate because we can't. They don't want us to influence the counseling. They don't want us to be a part of that.
Okay. What are the most common uses of a reverse mortgage for those who want to age in place?
So the most common uses is usually cash flow, right? Now, percentage basis, although we know all of you ladies out there are all 29 forever, but because you ladies live longer, percentage basis wise, more women have reverse mortgages than men do. What I see a lot is a single woman who is in her early 70s. She's living on Social Security. Okay. All right. She's already retired, or maybe she's working even part time. She has a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and she's got limited access to reserves, meaning she's starting to run out of money, but she's dipping into that in order to make the bills. She maybe has a small mortgage payment anywhere between $600 to $1,100 per month, and she's got to work part time. She's making decisions on when she turns on the HVAC, when she drives her car, what food she eats. I mean, she's really managing her money, but eventually she's going to run out if things don't change because she's on a fixed income. So we come in with the reverse mortgage, and if everything makes sense, all the calculations, we can stop the bleeding and improve her cash flow by eliminating that mortgage payment, which if I can improve her monthly cash flow by $600 to $800, $900 a month, that's a huge increase that's tax-free to that senior, because again, they're not coming out of pocket for that money anymore. It's just money they're not spending. So that's it. On a fixed income, that's a game changer for a senior. So it's usually associated with cash flow. However, we always say that a reverse mortgage, it's built around need, which would be cash flow, lifestyle, or plan. You can get very sophisticated with a reverse mortgage regarding planning when you're working with a financial advisor. Even for those clients that are, they've got $1 million or $2 million of assets under management. There's lots of strategic things we can do with the reverse mortgage to build legacy and to use the house as an additional lever to manage all of the assets you have. Lifestyle. There are no restrictions as to what you use the money for. None whatsoever. I just closed a loan, reverse mortgage for a borrower in Hawaii. He actually was 78 years of age, made great money, hardworking guy, but he liked to go on cruises. So he wanted to eliminate his $4,000 mortgage payment on his condo, and we were able to get him a reverse mortgage. So that freed up $42,000, plus he got a line of credit of $200,000. So he was able to do all the things he wanted to do and live up just a much better, happier life. What we like to say is stop stressing and start living. And that's what a reverse mortgage in a lot of instances can help you do.
The other thing I find with working with seniors aging in place is in-home care, because it's out of pocket. They don't have the money. But when a spouse is a caregiver, it's very difficult. And they would be able to pay for in-home care.
Yeah, if not pay for it or help subsidize it, or maybe instead of only having 1 or 2 hours per week, maybe they can extend what they call extend services to maybe 5 or 6 or 10 hours a week, depending on what that looks like and how much they need to bring in that in-home care provider. If you're spending $1,100 a month on a mortgage payment, but you could take some of that, put that into in-home care, that could be a game changer in terms of your quality of life.
What are the different types of mortgage loans?
So 99% of the time, the variable rate reverse mortgage, the HECM product, the monthly cap 5 is what's used. And the reason why it's used is because it's got a higher access to your equity and the way you can pull out the money if you have a line of credit. And you can pull it out when in the first year, you get access to about 60%, kind of a round number. And they limit your access because back in the day, going back to the 80s, people were pulling out all of their money and they were blowing it day one, and then they didn't have access. Then they had no more money to go. But they still had the reverse, didn't have to make a payment, but their line of credit was exhausted. So they limit you to about 60% year one. Then year two, you can get access to the rest of it. Or you can do what's called a 10-year payment, which gives you the opportunity to have a monthly payment. And there's a formula there that looks at the line of credit and what the amount is, and it looks at what your age is, life expectancy. But the formula, whatever that monthly payment is, it goes on a perpetuity. So if you live past 100, it continues to go for the rest of your life. That's called the 10-year payment. The term payment, all right, is for a specific amount of time. Okay, specific amount for a specific amount of time. And that is great for delaying access to Social Security. So let's say you're 65 and you want to retire, but you don't want to start your Social Security because FRA is 67. And if you extend to 70, you really benefit from that. So you can say, you know what, I've got a big enough line of credit with this reverse mortgage. I'm going to pay myself $2,000 a month for the next 5 years because the line of credit will accommodate that. That's going to fill the gap with my Social Security payment that I would have received, but I don't want to collect that yet because I want it to grow. And so so that's called the term payment. Or with the line of credit, you just don't have to touch it and you can let it continue to grow, which is a great option for a lot of people as well, because it does grow at the exact same rate that the actual loan balance does. The line of credit is not connected to the actual value of the home. So that's the variable rate. That's where most people go because of those reasons I just mentioned about 99% of the time. Then we do have another variable rate option, which is just slightly different in terms of the cap. But then we have a fixed rate option with a reverse mortgage. That's the fixed HECM product, the fixed rate reverse mortgage. And that's got a higher interest rate. It doesn't have as much access to your equity, and it's a one-time distribution of whatever that line of credit is. And so again, a lot of people don't like that because it doesn't have a lot of flexibility built into it. It doesn't give you a lot of access to your equity. It's really vastly different as it relates to access to your equity and how you can get access to a line of credit, because it's a one-time distribution. You're done and you're over. So again, 99% of the time we go with the variable rate. That's what the clients like. So
the other thing you mentioned that I think is really important is natural disasters. What if something happens to your house? You want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. So, like the Palisades or the flooding in Texas or the hurricanes or the tornadoes in the Midwest and the hurricanes in Florida. If you have a reverse mortgage as a senior and your home is destroyed, until the insurance company comes in, pays off the lost payee, and you have a line of credit, that line of credit is intact. Think about that for a second. Your home is destroyed. Now what do? FEMA hasn't come in and helped me out yet. I need some additional funds because I got to go stay in a hotel. I got to replace a car, whatever it is. I got to buy food. My house is to the ground. Okay. That line of credit is still intact until that lost payee comes in and pays off that reverse mortgage. That's incredible. That is incredible.
It is.
Right. That is incredible. That's again, the consumer protections with a reverse mortgage. I'm doing a reverse mortgage seminar this afternoon. And when we start to talk about the consumer protections, people are just shocked at how well thought out this product is. They're just shocked.
Yeah, there's no product like it that can offer that type of guarantee.
There's really not. I challenge financial advisors all the time is, do you have a product that has this many consumer protections in it? And they say, no, they don't, because they can put you in a product today that goes to zero tomorrow.
A lot of folks on an age in place have two-story homes, and they don't want to move because then they're going to have a mortgage, and right now they're mortgage free. Can you explain how a reverse to purchase works?
A reverse for purchase is a great product because for those seniors that are empty nesters, say, you know what, I got this 3,000 or 2,500 square foot house. I'm by myself now, no kids. My spouse has passed or moved on. I don't need 2,500 square feet any longer, but I've got a ton of equity. So the reverse for purchase allows the senior to sell their current residence, do a reverse for purchase. They make a down payment based on their age, the interest rate, and the sales price of the property, which then is verified by an appraisal. It's really important to remember that. The appraisal drives that part of that calculation. And once they make that down payment, they're not required to make a mortgage payment for the rest of their life. They just have to pay the taxes, insurance, and the HOAs applicable. So what does that look like? Let's run a number here real quick. So let's say an average age of a senior wanting to probably downsize, or what we like to call right sizing, right? Let's plug in a purchase price of something in your market that's, relative to the listeners on the call. So let's plug in 300,000.
Let's do 300,000.
Okay. And put the age at 75.
Okay, 75.
Okay. And let's put the margin at 2%.
It's there, 2%.
And then what is that required investment down at the bottom?
181,400.
And that's on a $250,000 purchase at 75 years of age?
300,000.
Oh, 300,000 purchase. Okay, great. Perfect. So, what we hear from seniors a lot, thank you, Rebecca. What we hear from seniors a lot is that, look, I'm going to sell my current residence. I'm going to take all that equity that I've spent the last 25 or 30 years earning, and I'm going to put all that cash into the next purchase. So if they bought a $300,000 house, they'd have to spend $300,000. It's dollar for dollar. But you just shared with us that it was a $181,000 investment of a down payment to buy a $300,000 house. So they didn't have to spend all that cash. So they put a little bit of money away. So it allows the senior to make a down payment. Again, it's based on your age, the interest rate, and the sales price / the value of the property after the appraisal. But you can step up in many cases. If you took your app out again and you said, okay, let's move it up to $350,000 purchase and kept everything else the same.
It shows that they have to keep him age 75. The required investment is $211,300.
Right. So you bumped up in $50,000 in the value or sales price of the property, but you didn't bump up $50,000 in cash out of pocket. You went from 181 to what was it, 211? Okay, so you want to buy $30,000 in that example. That's a great opportunity to save money and then to also step up and buy up in terms of the quality of the home. Depending on what market you're in, a $50,000 change in price can be a difference in size, can be a difference in location, right? Be a difference in quality. So that allows the senior to come in with a reverse for purchase, sell their current residence, take that equity and or their assets or a combination thereof, make a down payment, a one-time down payment, never have a mortgage payment for the rest of their lives, and all they're responsible for is the tax and insurance, and also, of course, maintain the property, which they're going to do that anyway. It's a very powerful product.
And they can get into a brand new home if they wanted to.
You can use a reverse for purchase for a brand new build. They can use it for a resale, whatever they can afford, whatever the math tells us that they can do, they can use that. They can buy anytime. There are restrictions in terms of type. If they're going to buy a manufactured home, it can't be on leased land. It's got to be attached, and the land's got to be part of the deal. If it's a condo, then we have to make sure that the condominium project is approved, or we have to get what's called a single unit approval, which takes a little bit longer. You could be a senior living in a single family residence, sell that residence. You could buy a duplex, live in one side, rent out the other side for additional income. You could be a senior, buy a triplex or a quadplex. As long as you live in one of those, you could buy one and rent out the other three for additional income. You could buy a house that's got an ADU, rent out the ADU, or you could live in the ADU and rent out the home in the front. So as long as that property is your primary residence, you have ultimate flexibility as long as you live there as your primary residence. There is an occupancy check every single year.
That's a great opportunity for investment.
It's a great opportunity for a senior to get some additional income. Now, could a group of seniors buy using a reverse mortgage together? Absolutely, they could. So you could have a brother and a sister, or you could just have seniors that aren't related to each other and said, hey, we want to pool our funds. They're going to go off the age of the youngest borrower. They'd all be on the mortgage. And they could all, let's say you got somebody that's been friends for a long time, and they both decide, hey, you know what, let's live together for companionship, for safety, security, a lot of reasons. They could both sell their homes, okay? They could then take that equity. They could then really buy up, depending on how much equity they have and how much cash, but they have to go off the youngest age of the borrower. They'd both be on their loan. They both have to go through the financial assessment. They have both, just like if they were married, right? Both have to go through counseling, but then they can buy the home together. And so there's no restrictions with that either. So again, I love the product. I really do. Yeah. And it was really designed with the senior in mind. It was really designed to protect the senior. And again, unfortunately, a lot of these myths came about during the 80s when a lot of these things weren't in place, like the counseling and the financial assessment and the eligible non-borrowing spouse. And that's the sad part about it. And the initial distribution limit, where you can only take about maximum of about 60%. Seniors were pulling out the entire $300,000 like my mom. And if she was able to access all that, she pulled it all out, she could go spend it on anything day one and not have a line of credit anymore. So there's limitations, there's protections, there's oversight without putting any restraints on the senior as it relates to it is their property, they're on title, they can do whatever they want with the money. It's just that first year they limit access to the money, but you can do whatever you get access to, you can do whatever you want with it. And you never have to make a payment. And that line of credit can never be taken away from you. The value of the property can go to zero. A HELOC, you got to qualify for it. You got to make a payment on it. There's a FICO score requirement, which with a reverse mortgage, there's not a FICO score requirement. They do look at your credit. They want to see if you've got, unpaid bills or you missed your property taxes, you have collections. Those things factor in, but the FICO score is not the determining factor. With a home equity line of credit, FICO score drives your interest rate, number one. Then they're going to look at what's your debt to income ratio. You're going to have to fully qualify for that loan, just like any other loan. The sad part about a HELOC to me is that a HELOC can be useful in some cases, very short term, but I don't think it's a great long-term solution, because if you miss a payment on your HELOC, they can take it away or freeze it. If the value of your property drops, like it did in 2007, 8, or 9, or like we're starting to see now as we switch to a buyer's market, property values starting to come down, they can freeze or reduce your line. If your FICO score goes down while you have the HELOC, because they monitor that, they can also freeze or reduce your line of credit. So there's not a lot of security for a senior. Plus, you have to make a payment on a HELOC. You draw out $5,000, you got to make a payment on a HELOC, right? So a HELOC is good if you can't get the reverse for whatever reasons. But if you can get the reverse versus a HELOC, that line of credit is intact. You don't have to make a payment on it. By the way, the unused portion of the HELOC continues to go up based on whatever the prevailing interest rate is. So a lot more protections. And as we talked about, your home could be burnt down, destroyed, tornado, whatever that natural disaster is. But until that lost payee is paid off by your insurance company or FEMA, whatever you have in that line of credit that's still usable, right, that hasn't been spent yet, right, you can get access to it. So it's a very, very strong consumer protection with the line of credit versus the HELOC. Those are two totally different things.
Nice.
Education is key, which is why this podcast is so important, right, for your listeners. We work together, and you can do the reverse mortgage as well. So hopefully your listeners reach out to you, right? It's all about the education. That's why podcasts and the seminars that we do are so important.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us?
I just want to say thanks for having me here. I'm honored to be, I think, your first podcast. And so this has been great. And again, I'm such a strong proponent for the reverse mortgage product. And really hope that if your senior listeners or the sandwich generation, where you've got mom and dad that maybe could benefit from a reverse mortgage, that they reach out to you after this podcast.
Thank you, Michael, for joining me today. And thanks to my listeners for being part of Seniors Home Zone. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Share it with someone who might find it helpful. And join me again in 2 weeks for another inspiring conversation on living safely, comfortably, and confidently wherever you call home. And if you're interested in learning whether you qualify for a reverse mortgage, please contact me.